What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to continue my series on bicycles that I own, and we will be talking about my 2014 Raleigh Tamland 2. The Tamland 2 has its own unique history in kind of like the gravel cycling space, and when I say gravel cycling or gravel bicycle, I'm talking about the bikes that are drop bar multi-surface bikes that fall somewhere between your cyclocross bike and your mountain bike. So anywhere in that spectrum, the marketing term that, cycling companies use. I know there's a big argument about, what a gravel bicycle is, and any bike could be a gravel bike, and, in 1903, every bike that was in the Tour de France was a gravel bike. But this is what I'm talking about. I think we all understand what a modern gravel bicycle is, and the simple fact is they really didn't exist that much in 2012. Salsa had put out the Warbird, which kind of was a step towards what we consider the gravel bike. And then a lot of people kind of think this took it to, what a lot of us now all consider a gravel bike. So what had happened was there's a cycling author, rider, and bike shop guy named Guitar Ted, and Raleigh reached out to him, and he was already aware of the Salsa and was not a huge fan of it, actually. And they asked him, what if he was to design a gravel bike, would it have? And so a couple of the things he suggested was disc brakes, which were not that common at the time outside of the mountain bike world, a slacker head angle, longer chain stays, clearance for 42s, 42 millimeter tires, and then a big main triangle for frame bags, braze-ons, and so you could put your rear rack and you could put fenders and all that kind of thing. Lower bottom bracket. So basically with the geometry stuff, what he was thinking is this would be a bike that would be super stable in like the really deep gravel. So you'd be able to be comfortable on the really long gravel rides. So, people had been riding kind of, cyclocross bikes and modded bikes for like the early versions of Dirty Cans and all that. And there wasn't something as specific. So he was thinking this is kind of what would make it so you could have a bike that could do that. And the comfort level would also make it and the stability level would make it a faster bicycle. A couple years later, he's at a bike show. He saw the Tamland 2, 2014 to be exact, and he was like shocked that they had pretty much used everything he had said. And I don't think I mentioned, but he also said steel. Raleigh ended up going with 631 because I guess it's a little softer, and for a gravel bike is able to dampen the vibrations even more. So yeah, he was really impressed with the bike and went out and bought one with his own money. He wrote a review, which I'll link below, which I think is very interesting. He goes, he says, I obviously had influence on the design of the bike, but I bought my own, so these are my own opinions. And goes on to say that going forward, it would be the gravel bike that all gravel bikes would be judged by. And I think, now it being, a 6-year-old bike and the gravel scene exploding, and you have, all kinds of different gravel bikes out there, it still does have a lot of what we would consider a typical gravel bike. I know with the original stock build, from what I've read, the negatives were it didn't have very good handlebars. I'm not sure what it was, but people didn't like the drops. The wheels were a little too heavy and made the bike a little too weighty. And then it came with a Ultegra road group set that was 50-36 in the front and 11-32 in the back, which is a pretty steep, group set for a bike that you would want to be able to do some serious gravel climbs. So I know a lot over time, people bought the bikes, switched out the drivetrain, switched out the wheels, switched out the bars, and, a couple other things. So my bike was bought by, brand new at the time, by Otis, who owns Dirty River. And he pretty much, same thing. He had sold off the group set. And I guess he didn't even get the 11-32 in the back. He said his was somewhere in the 20s, and it just totally didn't even make sense for a gravel bike, and especially the way he rides. He built his up more into a 1x setup, and that's the way, when I first started riding with him, he was riding this bike. He decided he wanted to sell the Raleigh, and he had it listed in the way he had it built up because he's not a Raleigh dealer, so he likes to ride what makes sense, bikes that the shop actually sells. And so he didn't sell it, and then I had done some photography and videography work for him, so he decided just to trade me the frame set for some of the work I had done, which I was totally into because I didn't actually own a gravel bike. I have my Roger Rivieri, which I had made my own version of a gravel bike. I have a video about that, and you can see a link to that down below or somewhere. But yeah, So I was totally in. I had owned a 9-speed Shimano 105 group set that I bought at a swap meet somewhere, and so I decided I would build it up with that. Then I switched out to the Velocity wheel set, which is much nicer. And I kind of got this really cool build going. There were all the bits that I had on the bike were like the silver chrome vibe. You know, I think he had a 105 crankset, or older crankset that he gave, and I think the only thing I put new on the drivetrain were some new front rings and the new rear cassette. So I was running 50-34 and 11-34 in the back and 9-speed, which really covered the gamut, which was great for me because I like to ride it on the road, and then I also like to ride it on some, you know, good gnarly gravel stuff. If you watch my video, our industrial gravel type rides, and then also I've ridden in some gravel races like Black Fork, which have some super steep climbs, and the 1-to-1 got me through it. The problem I started to have was the way the crankset was set up, or just being an older crankset, the 11-34 was a hard jump, and I kept busting front derailleurs. The derailleur I had on it at first that came with that but older 105 group set was a Dura-Ace, and I knocked the front plate off once, not even doing anything. I was riding on the road and just in the neighborhood, just going around a curve, and it broke just from the jump. Probably had already been stressed. I can't remember what we replaced it with, but I broke another one, and then Otis sold me a used 105 derailleur, and I broke that, and it was finally like, okay, this doesn't work. I need to figure out something different. And I was looking at GRX and all that stuff. What can I put on this bike? Because I love it, but this group set just isn't working. My friend Ryan had bought a Salsa bike, and he had a couple, and he decided he wanted to switch to SRAM electronic shifting. He had an 11-speed 105 group set, so he sold me the levers, the rear derailleur, the front derailleur, and basically I'm like, perfect, I'll build it up like that. I bought the matching 105 crankset brand new, and so I just got that on a couple weeks ago, and it's been awesome. It really completes the build. And it almost gets it back to kind of what it originally would have been, because that Ultegra group set now, this modern 105, takes a lot of its design cues from that, but it naturally fits that wider range. When I had it built up with the 9-speed, I actually had to use a wolf tooth component on the back to get the rear derailleur to drop so it could actually reach the 34 on the rear cassette. But now, with the much wider range derailleur, it does it all fine. I think the aesthetics, I preferred the aesthetics to the way I had it built up, but with all my bikes, this is actually the newest bike I own, even though it's one of the more recent bikes in my collection. I ride this bike so much, I've actually ridden it more than any other bike since I've had it. I'm close to 5,000 miles on it. I wanted one that just always worked. And that's the thing, it's like, you know, in the spring or the fall, I kind of ride it as my road bike when there's not a lot of light and our roads around here aren't very good. It's just great to ride almost as a, you know, kind of endurance, comfortable road bike where I don't have to worry because I have like the nice 42s on it and all that. But then it's also a bike that I could go out and be like, oh, if I want to hit a gravel section, I can do that. So it kind of covers just all the bases for me as a gravel road bike, a gravel exploration bike, and just a all-around good bike on any surface, even a normal road. Unique to me personally is this the first 11-speed group set I've ever had, and the things that I really like about it are the ergonomics of the shifters, how easy it is to shift and brake from the top of the levers. The front though, with the way they've made the crank or the rings or whatever it is, the ramps and the little, I'm not an expert in this stuff, but the stuff that pulls the chain up and helps drop the chain down, that 50-34 in the front is just so smooth. In the back, I don't notice that much of an upgrade in the shifting, but I love having the 2 extra gears, so each shift is not nearly as dramatic. That was a big thing I always noticed with the 9-speed having 11-34 is, you know, sometimes you were like a little between the cadence you would want. Maybe that's ridiculous, but it just, for such a wide range compared to like my road bikes, which, you know, I have other 9-speed group sets, it was really noticeable to just get those extra couple gears in there. So all in all, it's just become, now it's kind of my perfect build. I couldn't imagine anything else except maybe at some point investing, and I know other people have, in putting a carbon fork on it, dropping some weight. The fork doesn't have a ton of really good reviews. I know when they built the original model, the raked fork was actually part of the retro aesthetic that Raleigh kind of wanted to keep with their bicycles, which is kind of interesting. So in these videos, I do like to go into the history of the company that made the bicycle. I have another more vintage Raleigh, and I think it'll make sense to do the entire history of Raleigh when I do that bike. But the long and short of it is, this bike really is Raleigh in name only. You know, it has the head badge and the logo and all that stuff, but Raleigh from the 60s on, there was all kinds of mergers and consolidations, and there hasn't been a Raleigh actually made in the UK since the early 2000s. And then even since then, the company has been bought and sold multiple times. Doesn't mean that it's not they still don't make decent bicycles, but it's a Raleigh in name only as far as I'm concerned. It's not a Raleigh, the Nottingham that was the historical company. Anyways, I think it's a great bike. Like I said, I ride it all the time. I ride it for all kinds of different conditions. I even have done some light mountain biking on it. I haven't bike toured on it yet, but I think maybe as we get into some gravel touring, this would definitely be the bike I would ride to do that. So it's a bike, it's kind of what I consider my forever bike. You know, it's not perfect for anyone. With now 42 doesn't seem that like wide of a tire, but for the kind of terrain I'm still hitting, it's perfect for that. So anyways, that's a little bit about the 2014 Raleigh Tamland 2 and also the 2015 Raleigh Tamland 2, because they didn't change at all for that year, not even the paint scheme. So anyways, I will see you in the next video.